Today on Mid-Maryland Votes, we sit down with Sterling Sanders, Democrat and candidate for Washington County Democratic Central Committee. It's a lively discussion between people of different political backgrounds, proving that dialogue is the answer to chaos, anger, and hate. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we have a very special guest tonight. We have Sterling Sanders, who is currently running for the Washington County Democratic Committee.
So I'm Sterling Sanders. I'm 28 years old. I currently live in Keedysville, originally from Cascade. And I've lived just about everywhere in Washington County except for Clear Spring and Hancock.
How about downtown Hagerstown? You live there?
I just moved from South Mulberry Street to Keedysville.
All right. So you've lived all over Washington County, and now you're running as a Democrat for the Democratic Central Committee of Washington County.
Correct.
Have you run for office before, or is this something that you have pursuing for the first time?
So I actually got involved in local politics in 2016, fresh out of high school. In 2018, I made a decision to file to run for county commissioner under the Green Party ticket and withdrew before the primary election. And then in 2022, I ran for county commissioner under the Democratic ticket unsuccessfully, which I'm not upset about. I had some interesting ideas that didn't align with either party, and I think I realized maybe county commissioner wasn't the spot for me.
And in Washington County, running as a Democrat, particularly on a county level office, is actually an uphill climb in and of itself. So there's certainly no shame, and definitely want to congratulate you on throwing your hat in the ring. That's something that we desperately need all over this country. So thank you for that. Now, what got you interested in politics at such a young age?
So my dad passed away when I was 3. I was raised by a single mom. To this day, she has never registered to vote. And she talked a lot about government. Because she was a single mom, she had some assistants, had to work sometimes 3 full-time jobs to make ends meet. But she never registered to vote, and I didn't understand why. But then hearing things that she said and then listening to political candidates, I remember sitting at home watching TV and Barack Obama was running in 2008. And it was a game changer. And then I was like, this is pretty interesting. And I was always a fan in school of geography and history. And I think, being able to kind of see history play out sparked more of an interest in politics. And then really, like, for me, I'm not really concerned as much on the national end of politics. I really try to pay attention locally, specific to Washington County. Now, I have opinions about Frederick County and, other areas in Maryland, but I try to stick to educating myself every day with local politics. I attend meetings at different municipalities, Board of Education, sometimes the county commissioners, and just, getting an understanding that every single position, they're making decisions that affect us. And, if you're not interested in the politics side, you have to some extent be interested in the fact that what they do could potentially change your life.
It's the Washington County Democratic Central Committee. That's what you're running for. Can you give us a little background on, first of all, what is that entity and how it affects life in Washington County?
Yeah, so the 2 major parties, the Democrats and Republicans, both have central committees. The county committee acts as a body under the state party. And then obviously the state party acts as a body under the DNC or the RNC in the case of Republicans. So for the Democratic Central Committee, there are 8 elected positions, and it's a little different. I believe on the Republican side, it might be more, and they do things a little differently. Democrats, they do a gender neutral split. So they have the four top males that receive the most votes win, and then the four top vote getters that are females win. They also added the category of non-binary candidates. So I'm still learning that process on like how they place in terms of election results. But ultimately, they try to keep it gender neutral. And then the top vote getter in the entire primary election for that position ends up becoming the chair, unless someone else would be nominated. So the Central Committee, what they're responsible for, they're the executive and the administrative branch of the political party, where they are tasked with registering voters, engaging with the community, recruiting candidates, making sure candidates have proper training to run for office. They are in charge of fundraising, whether that be through their committee, through clubs, through political action committees. And then they're also responsible for dispersing some of those funds to assist with the growth of the Democratic Party, to assist with the success of candidates. Things of that nature. It's really administrative more than it is like a political position where it's going to really change your life, unless they're successful, obviously, at getting their candidates elected. And then that's really where that plays in.
So the central committees, it sound like, are a little bit of the power behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
A better term.
Absolutely.
And for you, what is it that that sets you apart from the other members or the other candidates that you want to bring to the Central Committee?
Well, so I think with the political time that we're in, we hear a lot about both major parties being inclusive. However, they're leaving out a lot of voices. Old time politics doesn't work. And with new generations coming into the field, voting, getting involved in campaigns, it's important for younger people to have a seat at the table, have a voice that's actually sitting on the committee, listening to them, making decisions that are going to benefit them, where they want to see the party grow. But also somebody that's willing to sit down and advocate with the different spectrums in the Democratic Party. But the reality is, the Democratic Party has a conservative branch. They have a liberal branch and moderate, which would be closer to conservative, and then they have the progressive branch. And then there is a further left branch that you would see popping up with the Socialist Party and Communist Party. Those that don't register with that third party that might register Democrat. So the Democrat Party is really a big tent. So you have to be able to have those conversations with everybody and making sure that no voice gets left on the sidelines. That really is something that's encouraging me, talking to different people, especially, you have your wealthier corporate Democrats. And then you have a lot of the more progressive Democrats that, might be anti-capitalist or anti-establishment. And for me, I think for me, it's how do you bring both parties to the table in that instance and find commonalities instead of fighting over differences. And that's my biggest goal with Washington County Democrats, because there is a broad mix of Democrats in Washington County.
So you talked about collaboration and bipartisanship, and that really is important for Washington County, which is heavily Republican. So what's your plan as far as building those relationships with the other side of the aisle?
Well, so everybody thinks of Washington County as a red county. But when you look at the voter registration statistics, I believe it's like 47 to 48% Republican. So more people are registered third party, unaffiliated, and Democrat compared to the Republican Party. However, a lot of it plays into candidate recruitment and candidate training. I think that the Democratic Party, to some extent, has kind of walked off of a bridge of cultural wars and left the bread and butter issues. And I think bringing some of those issues back, making sure that there's a focus on working class people, can bridge the political divide that we see. And obviously, I have goals with the Republican Central Committee. I'd like to team up with them and do like candidate forums and host debates together, things of that nature. Obviously that would come down to their, what their response would be after I'd get elected and propose that idea. But that's something that I'd like to do, to be able to work together, and we can hear the voices of every candidate that runs, and make decisions wisely, not based off of party line. We can hear each side.
You mentioned that the Democratic Party has kind of went a long way away from the working man in some cases, right? And some of the issues, some of those core issues, and that definitely has affected the polling of the popularity of the Democratic Party right now. It's at a historic low for the Democratic Party. And some of it is because of these extreme issues that the Democratic Party is accused of championing, to the neglect of the core issues. What are some of those core issues you think the Democrats need to get back to?
Well, I think that social issues matter. It's important to include everybody in the conversation and advocate for people, especially those of minority populations, those that are LGBTQ, women. It's important to advocate on their behalf as a party, as individual candidates. But one thing that everyone has in common is, am I going to be able to afford groceries at the local grocery store? How much is it going to cost to fill up my gas tank? Things of that nature. I think we kind of led ourselves astray. We started getting caught up on social issues more so than economic issues, where they both play a role of importance, but ultimately economic issues affect everybody, not just one demographic. In Washington County specifically, trying to find the correct candidates to run, that would advocate for affordable housing, things of that nature. I mean, whenever you look at a central committee, the central committee is not really pushing candidates to run for Congress or senator. But when you look at your state Senate and your state delegates, the Central Committee does have a push on those candidates, and making sure that those candidates are properly trained, and can actually be in touch with the average voter in Washington County. I think that, Washington County being rural and not completely urban, we are a lot different than Baltimore City per se. Our issues aren't identical to Baltimore City. And, while a lot of people would compare the city of Hagerstown to the city of Baltimore, there are still issues that are not the same. Where, our state delegates and our state senators have to go to Annapolis and they have to advocate for things in a different way and make sure we can find the common ground that we need to find. I'm happy to be supported by a lot of people already. I have thrown out quite a few endorsements recently. I think that one of the biggest issues that the Democratic Party holds, as a whole, is the relationships with labor unions. It's a struggle for the Democratic Party as a whole to continue some relationships. Like I said, as we veered off into the culture wars versus the economic, how do we help the working man issues. One of the things I did, I reached out to some of the local labor unions. I was endorsed by the Carpenters Union. And, I had a conversation with the council representative for them. And, he's an elected official in Garrett County, and he's a Democrat. But he also expressed that disappointment with the party, where there are a lot of working people that, the Democratic Party wants to always earn their endorsement. Their candidates want to earn the endorsement and get that check for their campaign. But until there's a focus back on those bread and butter issues, a lot of those working class people are voting Republican, even though their labor union is giving money to the Democrat. And I think that's important to look at. And how do we bring the Democratic Party back to the working class?
And the way you worded it was very interesting. Just a moment ago, you referred to it as walking off the cliff of social issues. And when you look at kind of the polling around the Democratic Party, it has reached a record low, according to CNN and CBS, the length of time they've been doing polls on this issue this year. And the issues actually, the reason for the unpopularity very much seems to revolve around exactly what you said, the social issues. What is your conjecture as to how the Democratic Party got put in this corner, so to speak, where it almost seems like it can't get itself out of? But you seem to have an awareness or an agreement that this is an issue.
It's so much easier to focus on an issue that a group of people are facing than it is to focus on issues that everybody's facing. And I think both parties kind of play into that, where it's easy to kind of get off the path of how do I make these people's lives better versus how do I make sure I continue to gain these people's support in regards to a demographic. I think both parties kind of do that. It's not really one sided, but I think overall the Democratic Party, they took the easy way out, so to speak. I think they are starting to learn from that. After having conversations with people, I hear people talking about some of the issues in the city of Hagerstown. And one of the things I'll do is I'll take a drive around the city of Hagerstown to see the issue firsthand. And then I'll contact my city council representatives. And, I'll reach out to people and say, hey, this was brought to my attention. I saw it firsthand. Here's some photos, whatever. What can be done about this? And, a lot of times, the people that talk to me aren't always registered Democrats. A lot of them are Republicans or unaffiliated. And at the end of the day, I think government should be working for the people. And that doesn't matter what party somebody's registered with. And I think, shedding that light back, that Democrats are working for the people of Washington County is going to be important. And that's one of my biggest goals after I get on this committee.
What parts of the Democratic Party are you seeing kind of rise to prominence? Because one of the things that we are observing recently across the country, and it also seems to be happening here in Maryland, is that for example, the Democratic Socialists, which are a socialist group an openly socialist group within the Democratic Party, are seem to be rising to a level of prominence that they've never had, either in the Democratic Party or in America. Is that perhaps one of the groups that you're referring to, or what is your take on that?
Yeah, so a couple of my friends are involved with the local Democratic Socialists of America chapter. And, I think really the message that I'm seeing as far as like a unifying cause is, a lot of them want something different, and not the same old establishment Democrat, because people are tired of the same type of politician. But ultimately, I think the majority of voters want somebody that's not afraid to kind of step in at the middle and bring people back together. And it's not saying that somebody wants a moderate candidate, but somebody that's not afraid to reach out to both sides without playing on a certain team, right? I think that people see that I'm not afraid to talk to conservatives. I'm not afraid to talk to Republicans that identify as MAGA Republicans. And I'm not afraid to talk to socialists. I'm not afraid to talk to communists. I'll talk to anybody to understand what their take is on politics, on local government, things of that nature, because ultimately we really want the same thing. We want what's best for each other, or what's best for ourselves in our opinion. We just might have different opinions on how to get there, right? But I think people see that I'm not afraid to have conversations, and I think that's why I've had such an outpouring of support when I announced that I was running for Central Committee. The sitting state delegate for District 2B has endorsed me. A former congressional candidate has endorsed me. I have the president of the Young Democrats of Maryland, or of Washington County, the chapter they have here, endorsed me. A labor union endorsed me. A couple of Democratic activists endorsed me. There's really a mix of a lot of people that have openly supported me already. And I think it's, people want the bridge to that divide. They don't, they don't want to continue going down the same path of stagnation. They want somebody that's going to jump in and offer new ideas. Do things that are a little bit differently. Right now, I have a lot of respect for the current Central Committee members. I know they have a difficult job, but I think that we're still kind of stuck in maybe 2020, and we need to get back out into 2026 and then 2028. And I know it wasn't that long ago, but times in the political atmosphere have definitely changed. And I think there need to be new approaches to doing things.
So you bring up some great points, and I would like to follow up with just back to Washington County itself, which is a county that you know very well since you've lived all over it. So Washington County faces a lot of challenges right now. There's economic challenges, there's housing challenges, there is drug addiction challenges. Some of the worst drug addiction issues in the state of Maryland are in Hagerstown. You have economic issues and development. How is the Democratic Party situated on looking at and solving some of these problems?
Well, I think really what it comes down to is listening to individual candidates. I think the Democratic Party is very open-minded with the candidates that they recruit. I think really listening to what those candidates say, and finding, the best option for the position that they're running for is important. Part of my responsibility as a Central Committee member would be making sure that the candidates that file have the proper training and resources from the Democratic Party, or, from any endorsement that they receive, different organizations that offer those resources, making sure that they are lined up so that way, they know how to tackle issues and they understand how to message that correctly. I think a lot of people have a lot of great ideas and they don't know how to tell the average voter about their idea. Making sure that the messaging and the communication skills are there and making sure people have the training to talk about those issues is going to be crucial. And that really is for any political party that runs candidates on the ballot. Making sure your candidates know what they're talking about, they have the correct information, and that they know how to talk about those issues.
So you said the Central Committee kind of controls or vets some of the people running for office. Is that accurate?
So the Central Committee, they have a responsibility to recruit candidates.
Candidates that can win. The reason I ask that is because you're in a largely conservative area. Although you did say that it's closer than people think, it is largely conservative. And the majority of candidates in Washington County are conservatives, Republicans. Even most of your Democrats in Washington County are more conservative. Right. So some of the candidates who have been running for office in the Democratic Party, even in the state of Maryland, are very far left. And you're going to have a hard time convincing your average union member Democrat to vote for a socialist, for instance.
When you look at candidates, do you want to be the candidate that wins the election, or do you want to be the candidate that changes the conversation and the direction of how the political future is going to be? Because really, I think there are some great people that run for office that they're not necessarily running to win. They are running, to change the conversation. And I think sometimes you do have candidates that are running to just kind of say, hey, I have a different idea and a different approach. I have a great relationship with some of the leadership with those organizations. And, I think bringing them in from wherever they are in the country and, having them sit down and talk to candidates and elected officials and letting them know, like, hey, this is where we can help and this is where we can't help. So that way people understand, that the resources are there, but, you can't fix every single problem with that one resource.
But if there is a move in the Democratic Party away from those issues of the older issues, the issues that you're moving away from, seem to be the issues that historically people voted for the Democratic Party to win elections and to represent. And so if these other issues are replacing the issues that historically people have voted for Democrats for, how the Democratic Party has been losing elections, particularly in the last election. The Democratic Party in Washington County did lose some seats. People like you are going to have to try to work out a middle ground that accomplishes both winning elections and accomplishing whatever this new set of issues and priorities you're referring to that have popped up.
Well, I think it's important to, really understand, and this is both sides of the political aisle. When new things happen, new ways of thinking come, like new generations come in with a new way of thinking about how to approach issues. I think it's important to look at what works. As far as the old guard, as you said, look at what works and what issues are important in that sector. But also look at what is happening and what people are upset about, what people want to see changed, things of that nature, and find that common balance between the two. Because I don't think you can replace anyone's way of thinking or a certain issue over another. But I think finding that common ground. I think what happened was both locally and nationally, the Democratic Party shifted away from the working class issues and started focusing on the social issues without trying to bring them together. Um, and I think that's my goal, is to go back in time a little bit and find those, like I said earlier, there's economic issues that people really care about, and how do they fit in with the social issues that we experience as well, and making sure that there's not one over the other in regards to importance, making sure we can find answers to the problems, most importantly. And sometimes that does mean reaching over the other side of the aisle and seeing what they're doing or saying that's effective. And also, sometimes you have to call bullshit when there's bullshit. I mean, I think the problem is people don't take stances as hard as they used to. Um, Both parties in Washington County, when there's an issue with a certain elected official or whatever it may be, the parties used to take stances on those issues. They would hold even their own elected officials accountable for their words, their actions. And now I think we attack each other so much that we forgot that we also have people in office or running for office that we still need to hold accountable. And we divide each other so much along party line that it's really it gives the perspective that it's impossible for me as a Democrat to vote across party lines, or for a Republican to vote for a Democrat. It does seem impossible, but the reality is when you hold your own accountable for their actions or for their words, if you look at the voter registration statistics from the last, I think, 2 to 4 years, you've seen a decline in the Republican Party in Washington County and the Democratic Party, and an increase of voters registering unaffiliated because they're tired of the division and the arguing and the bickering and fighting back and forth when there's no real solutions being provided by either side. And I think, as someone running for Democratic Central Committee, it's going to be one of my responsibilities to do what I can to grow the Democratic Party in Washington County.
You talked about political division, Sterling, and that really is a major issue across the whole country, but even Washington County. What would be your approach to bringing people together, lowering the heat, and increasing dialogue between Democrats, Republicans, and independents that could get some of these problems solved?
In Washington County, the city of Hagerstown, I understand that the positions are nonpartisan, but you have a mayor and council member that are Republican. You have 3 council members that are Democrat and 1 that's unaffiliated. So everybody's already working together, but we don't see it through that lens all the time. And I think mainstream media really divides us, to the point that, you're a bad guy if you watch Fox, and I'm a good guy if I watch CNN. But the reality is they're both saying the same things with different messages. They continue to divide us, and we eat it up. And eventually, we're going to have to be able to sit down and have conversations, agree to disagree where we can. And really, politics is all about debate and being able to open the floor to have bipartisan forums, debates with candidates. Something that I always wanted to see was the Republican Central Committee and Democratic Central Committee working together to host forums for candidates. If you have a Democrat and a Republican both running for state delegate or state senator, I'd like to try to organize with the Republican Central Committee to see how we could work together and maybe split the donation of entry or do a free event for once. People are tired of paying money to listen to somebody talk about issues that they already know about. The money aspect is really what has divided the bipartisanship, especially on the local level where it's more important, in my opinion.
Sterling, this is one of the problems that the Democratic Party is facing, is the labels. It's
Right.
the division. It's the identity politics. It churns people off. One of the biggest demographics that the Republican Party is recruiting right now is young males,
Right.
because a lot of them are saying that they have no place to go in the Democratic Party. There's nothing left for them. The identity politics have taken over. What would you offer these young male voters as far as the Democratic Party?
Well, I think young people in general are looking for a platform. And I think the biggest problem that we've seen in history with both parties is leadership never really listens and acknowledges what's being said. They just kind of say, you're young, you don't know what you're talking about. And I think, being able to set the stage and give young people that platform is going to be really crucial for the Democratic Party as a whole. At the end of the day, young people need to be heard, but more importantly, they need to be acknowledged by the leadership and organizations and political parties. And I think that's where we really lost young people in general.
And one of the major issues is political violence. It is horrifying, the amount of political violence that America is experiencing. Obviously, has been attributed to the rhetoric. And just yesterday, a Democratic senator from Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, went on a long rant that has seemed to have gone viral, talking about the need to end the extreme characterizations, etc. Do you think that it is possible for that?
Well, I think that plays into what I was just talking about, where, a lot of times party leadership and organizational leadership doesn't include or acknowledge young people. I think anybody of any age group can feel that way, where they're not being included in the conversation and taken seriously. And I think what has happened, you look at the political violence and it's always geared towards the far left or the far right. But I think the reality is people are so angry and so upset about specific issues that they don't know how to respond with their own feelings. On top of not being able to be heard. If I was upset about something and, I really needed to talk about it and nobody would listen and nobody would acknowledge that I was even there trying to talk, that a lot of times that goes into mental health crisis and committing violent acts and, so forth. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's important to condemn political violence on all levels. But we also have to understand where that's coming from on both sides, and figure out, how to include those people into the conversation because they're obviously upset about something. I think it's a root cause of not being included into the conversation or being heard. And, they might think that a violent act finally, gets their point across. Sometimes I guess it does, and sometimes it, makes them uh, not heard any more than they were in the beginning. So, at the end of the day, political violence is wrong, but we have to find the root cause to it.
So, as you said, political violence is wrong. And one of the ways that you can lower the temperature is to have dialogue, just like we've had tonight. Yeah. Sterling, we've reached the end of our time here, but we definitely appreciate you coming on and contributing to this dialogue here tonight.
Awesome. I thank you guys for having me on.
This has been Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me always is my co-host and friend,
Ethan Lowen.
and with us has been Sterling Sanders, who is running for the Washington County Democratic Central Committee. We wish you good luck, Sterling.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time. That was Sterling Sanders, a Democrat with a local voice and a lot to say about Washington County's political landscape. Conversations like this prove that honest dialogue beats division every time. Like, follow, and share for more content like this, and we'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes.